Welcome to the Spokesman Speaks, a podcast for farmers and ag professionals by the Iowa Farm Bureau, bringing you the news, experts, and educational insights that matter most. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to our October 4th edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler, and today's episode features Marshal Yanda, a former Iowa Hawkeye football star who was raised on a dairy farm near Anamosa and went on to become an NFL All-Pro and a Super Bowl champion. Marshal is the latest addition to the America Needs Farmers Wall of Honor at Kinnick Stadium, and he will be recognized on field during the 2021 A&F game when the Hawkeyes take on Penn State October 9th. So later on in this episode, you'll have a chance to hear from Marshal and learn about what we're planning for A&F Game Day. But we'll start this episode with the topic that should be top of mind for our listeners right now, farm safety during the harvest season. Dan Neenan is a firefighting and EMS veteran who directs the National Education Center for Agricultural Safety, which is on the campus of Northeast Iowa Community College in Peosta. Last week, spokesman reporter Corey Munson caught up with Dan, who was actually in the process of helping deliver some grain bin rescue tubes to Missouri as part of a larger program that delivered 55 grain rescue tubes to fire departments in 27 states this year. So Dan's right in the middle of the action when it comes to farm safety, which makes him the perfect guy for us to check in with as harvest reaches full throttle.
Dan, thank you so much for joining us today. Can we start out talking a little bit about when you meet with farmers for harvest safety events and, just right off the top, what are some of the first things you talk with farmers about?
Well, first is if you get the opportunity before harvest gets started, just to take stock of what machinery and implements are going to be on the roadway, checking to make sure that all the lighting is working and is clean and all the reflectors are clean. And, that if they're hit by headlights, that they reflect back upon what's coming up there. We're traveling on the roadways, 15, maybe up to 25 miles per hour. But the motoring public, the windows are now up, the stereo is on, and it's easy for them to get distracted. And when they come up behind you, that closing distance, if they're not recognizing you, can lead to problems.
We talked earlier about some concerns about taking equipment out on the roadways. Is there any messages that you like to deliver to just the common driver who may be out on a rural highway this time of year?
Absolutely. If you get behind a piece of farming equipment, it's kind of like stopping at a stoplight. It's part of the driving experience. As we get into fall, the days are going to get shorter. And of course, the farmers are going to be out in the harvest season. They outweigh you tremendously. And I will argue that nobody wins an incident between a piece of farm equipment and a vehicle. The vehicle, there's going to be a lot more damage, the possibility of injury. From the farming side, you get into that harvest season and then you lose the pieces of equipment that you need because it was in a roadway incident. So, for the motoring public, slow down. You need to be in a passing zone to even pass a piece of farm equipment. You can't legally pass a piece of farm equipment in a no passing zone. Always be taking a look for that piece of farm equipment to be making a left-hand turn into the farmstead. We see a lot of incidents, where somebody goes to pass and, the piece of farm equipment makes a left-hand turn and an incident occurs.
We were talking before recording here about your background, and you mentioned that you come from firefighting and EMS in your previous life before directing this program. So can you tell us a little bit about your personal experiences with farm safety, how you've interacted in that realm?
You bet. So I still am a volunteer firefighter and paramedic with the Epworth Volunteer Fire Department in working with that. And of course, living in rural Iowa, part of the incidents that you're going to be going to is something working with agriculture, whether it be barn fires from the fire side of things to folks that have been injured on the farm. And if you take a look at it with what that machinery was designed to do, a human body isn't going to, match up to that. So we've had folks, get involved with a chopper through the midsection of their body, PTO entanglements, animals, a cow that had just given birth and thought that the farmer was a little bit too close and, reared back and kicked and actually broke the farmer's femur, which is the largest bone in your body. And she wasn't any happier when we got there to be able to help out. So you've always got to take a look at what those hazards are as you arrive on scene.
In your experience, what are the most common safety practices that tend to fall through the tracks during harvest season?
Well, I think folks get into a hurry and things that you normally wouldn't do, like let's say if a belt would break, that you take it off and you replace the belt and then you put the safety device back on, where if it gets into the harvest season and you're really busy, you might take off the shield, replace the belt, and think I'll put that shield back on later. And, a lot of times that shield never makes it back on, or if there's an issue with that, then the safety shield's not there to do the job that it was designed to do.
One of the things that we often encourage farmers to do is to try to take short breaks when doing harvest, understanding that there's just a lot of work and you can just go for hours and hours on this kind of thing. Is that something that you strongly recommend as well, being sure to take care of the individual's physical needs, medication, stuff like that?
Absolutely, especially if they take medication that's food dependent. So diabetes is one thing that comes to mind. You take your medicine as a matter of routine, but part of taking insulin shots as a diabetic is that you eat. So if you take that insulin shot and you don't take the time to get some carbohydrates in there, you could have a low blood sugar event. And a low blood sugar event can cause some sort of injury when you're working with a piece of equipment.
Do you guys do much with grain bin safety?
We do. So we've got 2 grain engulfment simulators, so full-size trailers that we take on the road. We're involved with Grain Bin Safety Week, which is a product of Nationwide Insurance. So this year, we took in enough donations, and we are delivering 55 rescue tubes to fire departments in 27 states. And we've had now 26 of the departments that we've trained that have gone on to rescue somebody out of a bin.
And can you describe that equipment to us?
So it's a grain rescue tube. There are 7 of them that are commercially available on the market. Basically, it's a coffer dam. So if somebody's trapped in the grain, say to their waist, we're going to take that coffer dam, and it either comes in a 4 or a 6 panel setup. We're going to build it around them and sink it down into the grain. Then there's a grain rescue auger. So it's a 2.5 inch auger that we're going to use a cordless, brushless drill. Of course, a regular cordless drill will spark when you start it and spark when you stop it. So we don't want that inside the bin when you've got the grain dust and possible explosion. So we're going to auger that grain out. Most people will be coming trapped when the grain gets just over the top of their knees. Most people will be able to get out when the grain gets just below their knees. So that's our target, to auger the grain out till it's below their knees and then assist them with getting out.
Now, I'm assuming you're like me and always love seeing photos this time of year of youngsters getting to experience harvest season. What unique concerns do kids on the farm present, and what should parents keep in mind?
Well, I think, as the kids get old enough, to take a look at what jobs that they can do, that they're capable of doing. So actually the Children's Safety Network up at the Marshfield Clinics in Wisconsin have created a guide as to what is age appropriate for a child to do. You see the pictures of the child riding along in the tractor. And, the thing is, a child will wiggle, a tractor will hit bumps, and, if the child falls off, you can't stop fast enough, unfortunately, before you run over them. And we see stories of that every year, so to take a look at it, first of all, I don't think a child should be on a non-enclosed cab tractor, but if they are up in a cab of a tractor that is enclosed, that they're in the instructional seat with a seatbelt on.
What resources does NACAS offer to farmers if they go online and want to check out your website?
So on the website, we have created a farm first aid kit. So it's a first aid kit that's been modified for farming injuries. So we've taken out the small, what I call dainty bandages, and we've only got the bigger bandages in there because a farmer is not going to spend the time with the small ones. There's 4 times the eyewash solution that's in a standard first aid kit. There's a finger amputation kit in there. So if a finger or a digit would get amputated, it's a sterile bag to be able to place that digit in and keep it cool for possible reattachment. And then there's also an isothermic blanket. So as we get towards this time of the year where it's getting colder out, the sun's still out, or even if it's cloudy, there's UVA, UVB rays getting through, and the isothermic blanket grabs those to be able to warm the victim up, until we can get them extricated and on their way into the hospital. A lot of copies of webinars on there of different safety topics. Last week was Farm Safety and Health Week. So I believe there was 2 webinars per day. Those are taped and those are available there. In Iowa, all of our agricultural rescue training programs, tractor rollover, combine auger, grain bin, manure pit, and hydrosammonia, and how to respond to a grain storage facility on fire. If there's 12 volunteer firefighters in the state of Iowa, there is grant funding that we can come to your community and do that training at no charge to the fire department. So it might be a great way for the farmers to work with their local fire departments to make sure that they've got the training to be able to respond out to the farm.
Well, and that's a great reminder that farmers depend on and partner with local fire departments, which are, a lot of times manned by other farmers. So it's good to have that training and have that opportunity. Dan, can you just remind us of the website? What's that address?
It's www.necasag.org.
Thanks, Dan. It's easy to forget about safety when we're going at warp speed this time of year, but I appreciate you, our listeners, for taking a few minutes to hear from Dan. And, of course, if you'd like to learn more about the work the National Education Center for Agricultural Safety is doing, we've linked to their website in the notes for this podcast episode. Next up, we'll bring on the star of this episode, NFL All-Pro and Super Bowl champion Marshal Yanda. On Saturday, October 9th, Iowa Farm Bureau and the Iowa Hawkeyes will celebrate the important role agriculture plays in our daily lives during the 10th annual America Needs Farmers game. As part of the A&F celebration, Marshall will be the 9th former Hawkeye star to be added to the A&F Wall of Honor at Kinnick Stadium. Marshall's upbringing is actually really similar to the folks like you who are listening to this podcast. He grew up on a dairy farm just outside of Anamosa, and during a recent interview with Iowa Hawkeye broadcaster Gary Dolphin, Marshall talked about some of his favorite memories growing up on the farm, along with the important values he gained.
It was my dad and my uncle who mainly ran the farms. My uncle did the pigs, and my mom and dad did the dairy cows. So, my parents were always milking cows. You live life through just seeing things, right? And I got to see my parents work extremely hard every single day. Those cows needed to be milked, morning and night, every day, all year long, and that was just a way of life for us. So, me and my sister Katie did the calf chores in the morning before school. And, and we always had projects on the farm, whether, it was, baling hay or fencing or, or moving cattle or rounding up cows, just things. There was always something to do on a farm. And that was how we lived. We lived north of Anamosa in a rural in the country, and then we lived back in a lane to where you really didn't know what else was going on. The whole world was out there and we're just working on the farm and enjoying life. And that's all we knew. Right. So, it was an amazing, childhood and youth. And like I said, just the values that were instilled in me, on that farm is something, like I said, I take with me to every day is that, my parents worked their tail off and put their life into those cows and put their life into the farm and had a great upbringing and a great work ethic instilled in me. Some of the most difficult jobs, I remember, as a kid for us was pitching calf condos. So say me and Katie fed the calves and we had 20 or so of the baby calves. Well, they're in calf condos, and sooner or later, obviously you would bet them, every weekly, and that bedding would pile up, and then pretty soon those calves would be big enough and they'd get moved. Well, then you'd have to clean out those condos. Well, you couldn't get in there with a skid loader or anything. It was literally with a shovel or a pitchfork. You could bring the skid loader bucket up to the condo, but you literally have to pitch out each one of those. And of course, we bedded them till they were probably 3 feet high. So each condo had 3 foot of, manure, straw, everything in there. And usually they were, whether depending on what time of year you pitched them out, that was probably one of the jobs that I think was the worst for us, right? Pitching those condos out. But like on the other side of it, like seeing like, the progress of your work, whether mom and dad always had, tasks for us, whether it's baling hay, I was too young when we were baling hay. I would sit on top of the hay rack and push the bales down to our hired hand, Matt, and he would put them on the conveyor. Well, to watch that process of them mow hay, start at the, the bottom of the hay mow where like literally it was the old barn floor. And then by the end of mowing, it was, 35 feet high of bales. And just to see that accomplishment, and all the sweat and, and just your whole hair and everything was full of hay, you had little particles of alfalfa, in every crevice of your body, so the satisfaction of, seeing your hard work, seeing the success of that and just seeing, that take form is probably the best thing about the farm is, you get in what you put into it for sure. You work your tail off and you work hard and things, farms tend to show that for sure.
As we mentioned, Marshall's being celebrated as part of the upcoming America Needs Farmers festivities at the University of Iowa. But of course, the America Needs Farmers cause isn't new. It actually began decades ago when then head coach Hayden Fry put a gold A&F decal on Iowa's football helmets during their 1985 Rose Bowl season to show support for farmers struggling through the 1980s farm crisis. Marshall says the importance of A&F still rings true today.
It's a reminder that obviously the world's changing every single day, but obviously people still need food, people still need, fuel, people still need all these things. And sometimes, obviously, I get it. I understand, people don't know what they don't know, and they don't know where things come from, and they don't know how things get to, the grocery store, to the fuel station, or how things are processed. So to shed some light on that, to remind people that there's, people working really hard every day to make this country a great country that we live in. Like I said, I'm very proud of that.
Marshall's rise from junior college football player to Iowa Hawkeye star to NFL All-Pro and Super Bowl champion is truly remarkable. But it didn't just happen. There was a foundation laid and a fire lit during Marshall's childhood on the farm that helped him overcome obstacles along the way, and that gives Marshall some extra appreciation for now being recognized on the A&F Wall of Honor.
I'd say it's tough to, compare it to football and, like say like the Super Bowl or accomplishments and stuff like that. But obviously it was a way of life for me, just, growing up on the farm and how it, shaped my life and molded my life. It's definitely a special honor, and it's close to me just because of how I was raised and how hard my parents worked. And it's something that you take with you every single day of my life. So it's awesome. You find out, and growing up on the farm, there's a lot of, variables that you cannot control, and failures happen every day where, no matter how hard you work or no matter how hard you try, things are going to happen and you're going to fail, and it's about, what you do and, when you get knocked down and for sure, I mean, that definitely, translates to football in a lot of ways. And yeah, it's for sure. It's a tough way of living, but it teaches you so much about life, and that's why I love sports too. That's why I love football, because you're going to have your days in football where, guess what? That other guy, he's paid a lot of money, and you know what? Once in a while he's going to win, and that's just part of the deal. And you got to pick yourself back up, and you got to learn and adjust, and you got to fight every single day. And I feel like people are fighting on the farm too. You're working hard and sacrificing.
That's our kind of guy right there. Congrats to Marshal Yanda on being named to the A&F Wall of Honor. If you'd like to meet Marshall, you'll have that chance in just a few short days. Every year on A&F Game Day, Iowa Farm Bureau hosts an A&F Legends tent in the Kraus Family Plaza, which is just southeast of Kinnick. And this year, we'll have Hawkeye legends like Marshal Yanda there signing autographs for fans, as well as free games like Tailgate Toss and High Striker for your chance to win some great A&F prizes. The game kicks off at 3 p.m., but the A&F Legends tent opens up at 11 a.m., and we'll stay open until close to game time, so be sure to come out early and see us. For a list of all the A&F Game Day details, check out the link in our episode notes. Okay, we've reached the end of this episode of The Spokesman Speaks. I hope you enjoyed it. We hope to see you at A&F Game Day on October 9th, and as always, we welcome you to tune in for our next podcast episode on October 18th. Thank you for doing the work that inspires everything we do here at the Iowa Farm Bureau, and thanks for listening to the Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to The Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcast episodes at iowafarmbureau.com/podcast. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews, and we welcome you to email us your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.